Brazil may not have weapons of mass destruction like nuclear weapons, but it has something even worse, the Brazilian government. And an explosion of problems is coming because of the Brazilian government while you're not paying attention and no member of parliament is doing anything to stop it. In fact, some even support it, which is the Brazilian Real Estate Registry, which was established by Decree number 11,208 of 2022, integrating the National System for Territorial Information Management, National System for Territorial Information Management. This system unifies cadastral, geospatial, fiscal, and legal data of urban and rural properties fed by public agencies such as notary offices and utility companies. The SIB creates a unique tax identifier, a kind of cadastro de pessoas físicas for the property, with the real estate unit being geo-referenced. Per Complementary Law number 214 of 2025, the SIB identification will be required. In some cases, up to 12 months, in others, up to 24 months. By 2025 and 2026, notary offices in capitals must link their databases with National System for Territorial Information Management, while smaller municipalities have more time. In practice, this increases the speed between a real estate transaction and the tax authorities becoming aware of it, thus strengthening oversight. The increase in the effective tax burden and administrative complexity for individual property owners who rent out their properties greatly changes the country's economic equation. But don't worry, because investment advisors here on YouTube already have the magic solution, which are real estate investment funds which emerge as comparatively more efficient investment vehicles, offering professional management, liquidity, and diversification. The legislation then acts as a powerful catalyst, driving the transfer of real estate assets from the hands of small and medium owners to large financial structures. You will pay less tax and you won't have the hassle of having to manage the problems with the properties. Tedious and lengthy court processes that take years to resolve anything, or having to worry about renovating and managing the properties. Nonsense, forget about that, leave it to the professionals. By the way, most of us don't even own any properties, so there's really nothing to worry about. That's someone else's problem, it's not your problem. And with real estate funds, at least you'll have democratized access to properties. But no, the devil is in the details. You're not noticing or giving it importance. But we're witnessing in real time a transformation taking place in Brazil, which has parallels in historical processes of land ownership reconfiguration. The forced collectivization in the Soviet Union, which abolished private property in favor of state control. It can't resemble at all what we're seeing in this Brazilian case. After all, it's not the government taking people's property, but rather large private managers helping you manage your money. But the truth is that this is a very efficient and very silent mechanism, something that not even Stalin or Lenin could have thought of. Because this deep down shares the same structural result, the removal of control over the land asset from a broad base of individuals and its consolidation under a centralized authority. In Brazil, the financial sector's alliance with the state is a diabolical combination. And one thing I need you to pay close attention to is that, even if this isn't a conspiracy, a collusion between the government and the big banks, it doesn't matter. In the end, even if the two of them are not coordinating this together, the effects will be the same, which is the weakening of private property and of the small landowner. When I say land, I don't mean farms or ranches. I'm talking about real estate or apartments, as long as you own the property. But the worst part is that while one group will blame greedy banks, the right will blame the greedy government. And both will take part in this together again, whether in collusion or not. It doesn't make a difference. And a lot of people say that real estate is a thing of the past, outdated, it doesn't make sense because it's very hard to manage. It's a headache with the tenant, going to court takes a long time, don't you get it? The bureaucracy, difficulty, and delays in real estate court cases are intentional. Precisely so that people don't invest in this type of investment. After all, owning property gives a certain freedom to those who have it, as I will mention later. And even worse, a lot of people will actually think this is good because they'll jump right into these real estate investment funds. People who think they're Leonardo DiCaprio, like in that movie The Wolf of Wall Street. In reality, they'll be jumping right into the lion's mouth on purpose. And with new oversight mechanisms that the Brazilian government intends to implement in the coming years, the tax issue will be colossal. We're not just talking about rising rents and the increased cost of living, maybe 2 or 3 times more than it already is today. If it were just that, it would be fine. I mean, not really fine, right? But it would be the least of the problems. The problem is literally eradication, the eradication of private property. We're seeing the first steps of this happening in real time. It may sound like an exaggeration, but all the evidence points in that direction. And if you ignore it, you'll pay a high price for it in the future, even if you don't own any property or never plan to own property. You will be a victim, make no mistake. Don't be under any illusions. We will all be victims of this collusion. My name is Adriano Beta, and this is the World Geopolitics channel. See you. Formalizing and valuing real estate in Brazil tends to strengthen financialization in the sector, transferring part of the attractiveness of direct ownership to negotiable instruments such as real estate investment funds. The Brazilian Real Estate Registry, CIB, provides increased legal security and transparency for asset ownership and value, reducing uncertainties and making large-scale securitization feasible. With this, market liquidity increases because investors can trade investment fund shares daily and invest smaller amounts in a diversified way. On the other hand, with the cost and rigidity of buying a physical property, in addition, the tax environment favors these funds, while direct rental is taxed up to 27.5% by the income tax and requires dealing with vacancy, default, and bureaucracy. The dividends distributed by real estate investment funds remain tax-exempt for individuals. The increased oversight of informal rentals further expands this advantage, since the income received through the fund already reaches the shareholder net, leaving no room for omission. The appreciation that the unified registry will bring to properties that were previously undervalued can also push heirs and families to sell assets and reinvest them in real estate funds, monetizing their wealth in a simpler way and with management. Consulting firms emphasize that while real estate offers tangibility and autonomy, real estate investment funds bring less bureaucracy, greater liquidity, and diversification, which, in the new scenario, tips the scale in favor of the financial model. And the numbers confirm this trend. In June 2024, there were 2.7 million individual investors in REITs, 8.35% more than in the previous semester. And the total net worth of the sector reached our Brazilian real 340 billion, with strong participation from institutional and foreign investors. The Comissão de Valores Mobiliários itself recognizes the central role of REITs and CRIs in financing the real estate market. And this regulatory modernization should further boost modalities such as paper REITs based on receivables and development REITs, which can raise funds more securely. Thanks to the standardized registration, therefore, the new rule that is being established is the new order. It benefits investors who gain exemption and liquidity, large asset managers and banks who expand their client base, and the organized real estate market, which receives more financing. Meanwhile, the small property owner who insists on holding property directly faces rising costs and bureaucracy and is naturally pressured to consider the financial alternative. A trend that was already observed in other countries and is now fully visible in Brazil. And here comes another detail regarding REITs. They seem to provide liquidity and practically eliminate the need for you to worry about your investments, your assets. In reality, someone else manages your assets and you have no say. It's easy, true, but you lose your freedom, and if you lose your freedom, don't fool yourself. That asset belongs to someone else now. And it's much easier to take away access to investments. It's easier to control digital assets through brokerages and banks than to restrict access to land, which is harder. So this whole process leads you, as you try to escape all this bureaucracy and difficulty, to go for something that seems more profitable and easier. In reality, you're losing your freedom, and in the future, this will lead to the loss of your assets. This leads to the question, who are these real estate funds? The Brazilian Fundo de Investimento Imobiliário market has 439 funds listed and traded on B3. In June 2024, that's a 19% growth in just 1 year. Among them are some giants, with the 10 largest FIIs being KNP 11 or Kinea price index with approximately 7.58 billion being the largest fund in the market. In terms of assets, Kinea Real Estate Income, which like the previous one is managed by Kinea, which is Itaú's asset manager and invests in real estate credit portfolios. XPML 11 or XP Months, a shopping mall fund with about 6.13 billion in assets, holding stakes in several malls across the country and is managed by XPA7. Credit Suisse Hedging Grifo Logistics, a logistics and industrial warehouse fund with 5.33 billion managed by Patria Investimentos. Credit Suisse Hedging Grifo Kinea Real Estate Income, also managed by Kinea, that is Itaú. BTG Pactual Logistics with 4.49 billion raised in assets, managed by BTG Pactual. Vinci Shopping Centers, a shopping mall fund with about 3.66 billion reais, managed by Vinci Partners. XP Log and Maxirenda, both managed by XP. Irindium Receivables is managed by Irindium, an independent asset manager specializing in structured real estate credit. The largest real estate funds in Brazil are controlled by a few financial groups, which reveals a strong market concentration. Kinea, the arm of Itaú Unibanco, manages giants totaling almost 18 billion reais as well as other relevant funds, consolidating Itaú Kinea as one of the main players. Along with XP, BTG Pactual operates on two fronts as a manager of important funds and as the largest fiduciary administrator of the responsible. Over $60 billion in assets spread across 154 funds providing access. Privileged access to information and management fees over a significant portion of the sector. Credit Suisse Hedging Grifo, now part of UBS, manages billions in logistics, office and shopping mall segments. Vinci Partners, in turn, has consolidated its position as a large independent asset manager, being mentioned alongside XP Kinea and BTG as a benchmark. In addition to these, there is a group of specialized asset managers that complete this ecosystem, such as Capitania Iridium, Valora, and others, along with buildings tied to public banks like Caixa and Banco do Brasil. From the perspective of concentration, 2023 data showed that only BTG Pactual and BRL Trust together manage more than 99 billion in real estate investment funds, and that fewer than 10 institutions concentrate practically all the management in the sector. In active management, Kinea dominates the certificates of real estate receivables funds, XP holds the most popular funds among investors, and BTG and Vinci control huge portfolios of physical properties. Recent academic studies already describe the phenomenon as a monopoly of monopolies, where funds concentrated in the hands of a few take over properties that were already unequally distributed, further increasing centralization. In other words, people think they are democratizing access to real estate, when in fact they are restricting it more than ever. The practical effect is that an office building that used to belong to a few investors now becomes part of a giant real estate investment fund, with thousands of dispersed shareholders, but whose actual decision-making power is restricted only to the manager and large institutional shareholders. Owning a property lets you rent it for residential or commercial use, live in it, or start your business there. Or if you want, tear it all down and build a car wash or parking lot, whatever you choose, since it's your land. In real estate investment funds, you actually don't own anything. You're subject to whatever the managers decide. It's the perfect trap because they sell the promise of ease and easy profit while taking away your freedom. So, a few administrators like BTG BRL Trust or Vortex concentrate fiduciary management, while some dominant managers like Kinea, XP, BTG, and Vint decide the fate of billions in real estate assets. Many of them, connected to banks or large conglomerates, turn the real estate sector into a branch of the financial system. You lose something material to have something ethereal. You lose the land or access to the land to now have an algorithm. It's the perfect marriage of a paternalistic state which gives you everything, to a banking mother promising ease and low prices. You lose your freedom and your real property. Analysts, critics, and academics have debated whether the recent legislative changes in Brazil, especially those involving property registration and taxation, they favor the concentration of wealth in large financial institutions, while at the same time reducing the autonomy of small property owners. This is not capitalism, it's state socialism, using banks as a tool, thus avoiding the political backlash of the image of forced property appropriation. The left will keep blaming capitalist banks while absolving the state, thinking that the state is a victim of this, when in reality it's a perverse association and administrative fiscal mutualism. What makes me most anxious and desperate is seeing this situation and no one paying attention. Even the opposition, yes, the opposition. Any non-government group, whether central, right, far right, or so-called right, won't do anything. Because they know that if they win the elections in the coming years, they'll inherit this titanic, colossal, and astronomical deficit caused by the Pietista administration. And they won't be willing to give anything up ahead of time. They won't do anything. On the contrary, they'll try to use this to their advantage as well. It's an even worse situation than we can imagine. And there's a historical parallel being drawn between this current process of land financialization and past episodes like Soviet collectivization or land reforms inherited from ancient empires. Essentially, the idea is that legal changes in the structure of land ownership have often resulted in transfers. For example, the Soviet Union in the 1930s, Stalin implemented the forced collectivization of agriculture, expropriating millions of small rural landowners, the kulaks, and transferring the land to collective farms under state control. It was a drastic process, where small and medium private properties were taken over by the state between 1929 and 1931, eliminating private ownership of agricultural land. The result was the concentration of all agrarian power in the state, with tragic consequences, such as a drop in production and famine, as well as the complete loss of autonomy for the peasants. At first glance, this case appears opposite to the current one. There it was nationalization, while here it's private financialization by banks. However, here's the catch. In the Soviet model, it was argued that collective and centralized management would increase efficiency. Current Brazilian model. It is argued that management through large institutions such as funds, banks, or even a national registry would increase efficiency and allow for large-scale investments, for example in housing or logistics. And in both cases, small landowners lose their prominence. They no longer get to decide about their land. The Soviet Union started obeying orders from the Collective Farm Committee and the Financialized one. The individual owner who sold his property and became a shareholder in a real estate investment fund delegated the decisions to the fund manager. Of course, there are fundamental differences, such as the issue of voluntariness around this. After all, no one is forced to do this. But from a structural point of view, pay close attention, it's the reduction of the small owner's autonomy. In addition, when the state creates a mandatory single registry, it imposes detailed declarations, where some critics warn of possible state control over the land. Where it is worth remembering, the declared purpose of the CIB is not to nationalize anything, but rather to tax in a way that they claim is fairer. Throughout history, fiscal changes regarding land and property have often redefined who held economic power in the Roman Empire. In the late Roman Empire, for example, the tax burden on small rural landowners was so heavy that many couldn't even pay the taxes, and they ended up losing their land to large landowners or falling into servitude under the protection of these powerful individuals. This contributed to the formation of vast estates in the hands of a few, the patricians and regional lords. While the former free peasants were losing their independence in the Ottoman Empire, the introduction of the 1858 Land Code required formal land registration and payment of taxes. Many peasants, afraid to register for fear of military conscription or taxation itself, failed to do so. This led to their lands being registered in the names of urban notables or merchants, also causing a transfer of communal and traditional lands to private elites. We're seeing similarities in this case and in other places worldwide that have experienced this. With these nations, these empires, civilizations that went into decline, it's not a coincidence, it's not a small thing, because these societies were already declining, to the point of allowing the concentration of power, wealth, and land ownership to be even more in the hands of small elites, endorsed, supported, and encouraged by the state itself, by the central power itself. And after that happened, it accelerated the inevitable decline even further. It was already bad, then got worse and accelerated until they collapsed. And here, in this case, there's only one difference. Because there, at least, they knew they were losing their possessions and they created an entire psychological and propaganda context. And tax issues to give the impression that, in the end, you're actually better off. Now, you won't be the owner of an outdated property anymore, but rather a luxury investor. You'll have more wealth, you'll pay less tax because someone will take care of your wealth for you. In other words, they're managing to take your property and still make you feel grateful and satisfied for losing your property. In practice, it's the kind of thing that deceives both ends of the ideological spectrum. The left believes that higher taxation, greater taxation, will provide more social benefits to the poor. The right, thinking they're investing in large real estate funds, will believe managing their resources is easier, when in reality both sides are simultaneously being crushed. In academic works on urbanism and economics, the concept of the financialization of urban space has been gaining traction. Researchers from the Faculty of Architecture and Urbanism at the University of São Paulo point out that in recent decades, the Brazilian state has actively promoted the conversion of housing and land into financial assets. This happens through incentives for real estate securities, public-private partnerships for urban development, and now with the creation of a national registry that facilitates the securitization of properties. Here, the small property owner's autonomy as a landlord has decreased. Meanwhile, land and properties are now controlled by large asset managers and financial metrics. Without a unique identifier and integrated data, it was more difficult for a fund, for example, to investigate hundreds of properties. But with this new CIB, it becomes ridiculously easy, lowering the costs for big investors to enter any corner of the country. On the other hand, the local homeowner loses symmetry, information gaps that sometimes favored an undervalued property. In peripheral areas, which now being georeferenced, attract the interest of a land fund. Throughout history, direct access to land has always been synonymous with freedom and prosperity. Peasant peoples, small landowners, and autonomous communities have found in land ownership the foundation to guarantee sustenance, shelter, and cultural continuity without depending on intermediaries. Land grants autonomy by enabling food production, income generation, and transforming space for various uses, such as farming, commerce, housing, or artisanal production. Freedom takes work, and generally, people don't want to give up their freedom by working. When land rights were denied or held by a few, dependence, servitude, and deeper structural inequality emerged, as in European feudalism. But when access was expanded, as in successful land reforms or in the formation of societies of highly active small capitalist landowners, strong middle classes, social stability, and economic dynamism emerged, something fundamental for a more capitalist and freer society. The relationship is direct. Land gives individuals the power to make decisions about their material lives, reducing their vulnerability to control by financial or political elites. That's why, historically, the freedom of a people has been deeply connected to the right to own and manage their own land. It is not just an economic asset, but the foundation of true social independence, whether against the state or against the powerful elites. And the worst part is that a lot of people will support this or won't care, thinking it won't affect them. A lot of people don't even like landlords, because they think they're greedy and oppressive. In the end, this will affect everyone. Those who have a few properties, those who don't have any but want to, and those who don't have any and don't even want to. This is an aspect that will impact the economy. Everyone will drown on this sinking ship, and that's what you need to understand. Many people will support this because it's a way to crush landlords they don't like, thinking that by doing this it's something fair or something good. While they're angry and think it's good that these small landlords are crushed by the state and the big banks, they end up handing their money over to the big banks. In other words, the idea of social justice is to target the small business owner, the small landlord, while benefiting the big banks. They colluded with the government. Whether you're on the left or the right, you're going to be affected. Private property is the guarantee of your freedom. And even if you don't own private property like a house, the fact that you can have access to it is already a guarantee of freedom. Not everyone must own property, but everyone should have access to it, which the government is now taking away due to bank pressure. And in the end, that's not a good thing. The issue is this whole psychological and tax web that pressures people to give up physical, real assets and jump into something ethereal, abstract, digital, and easily confiscatable. If you think Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency will solve everything, forget it. You live on Earth, in Brazil. And by living here, even if you stay, I don't know, isolated with Starlink and Bitcoin, you're still going to be affected. You can't have the illusion that in a degraded society you won't be affected in some way, even if your assets are magically safe. There's no illusion. Either everyone unites against this, and I'm almost certain they won't, or everyone will drown and learn a very harsh lesson. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it. I doubt anyone actually did, but anyway, subscribe to the channel to help it keep growing. And it's really important that you share this video with everyone you know, and in this case, really do share it. The idea is for people to realize the risk of what we're seeing now. Hugs, and see you in the next video. Pache?